This Advent season. By the way, we're not in the Christmas season yet. Christmas season um, for 1,200 years started on Christmas and went for 12 days to the Sunday after the Epiphany. Seeing through, you see. So when I talk, we're on a sea voyage. We're on a voyage on kind of rough seas, a tsunami really, to get from here to Christmas. And but it's also a sea version, a sea voyage. The Epiphany means these guys, wise guys from the east saw through the the surface of just some couple of displaced people, a little baby in a cave or stable. They saw through that to something more significant. So this is a sea voyage, and it might take more than four weeks, might take more than 73 years. That's the beauty of the fact that it comes around for us to see. Now, the tsunami is just what we're living with. Sailing through a tsunami to Christmas. Tsunami is this unbelievable wave of commercialism. None of it's sacred, that gets in the way of seeing. What is the meaning of Christmas? What is the meaning of this liturgical year? What is the meaning of why it comes back every year for about 1,200 years to try to give us another chance? And I'm really happy for that. I'm glad for that. It took me many cycles to even have a sense of what Easter was. Christmas is even harder. All this, we live in this culture, and all this stuff gets in the way of seeing. Layers and layers of veils of commercialism, in our case. Yeah. So sailing through a tsunami to Christmas, and the through is paying homage to where we just were for the last 3 months, learning how to heal through the dark emotions by going through things. Jesus got the disciples into the boat and kept crisscrossing the Sea of Galilee, taking them to another shore. And it was a tough voyage. It was scary for them sometimes. But as my Dutch Zen master, Hans Koenen, who's now in the next level of this, he's in postgraduate work somewhere. he's left this plane. He used to say, Jesus never walked on the water. He walked on the sea. And he was really stressing that, because it's not like a miracle. He didn't walk on the water. To walk on the sea, to voyage across the sea is to voyage. The sea was a dangerous place filled with a lot of danger for those people at that time. Nobody went to the seaside for recreation then. The sea is all this emotional turbulence, all this media turbulence, all this stuff going on. It's just to go through it, actually get to Christmas, to the real sense of what this is supposed to be. That's a voyage. And I'm going to devote, 4 talks to it, to this, sort of part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4. And then I'm actually going to be here on Christmas. I already told Jill that, if she's, everybody, Christmas bends us in a lot of different directions. But, family. The whole thing about one of the things Jesus was trying to get across to them, part of Christmas, is to realize your family is much bigger than the people who you were born with, the people that you birthed. And so I'm going to be here on Christmas. Maybe there'll be, 1 or 2 people here. I don't care, because there's some people who don't have anywhere to go on Christmas. Some people don't have a family, and this is that family. So I'll be here. If it, works for me, might not work for Jill, but so I can run the whole thing myself for that day. But I want you to know that there'll be somebody here for you on Christmas, a different meaning, a wider meaning. Nothing wrong with, I love my family, but the whole idea of Christmas is something bigger. It's become very small, and how I mean, everybody's starting to dread this Christmas season. Well, it's not the Christmas season. So don't even go there. We're in Advent. And Advent, the word means getting ready for something huge. You're getting ready. It's a lot like, we start with Mary and, Gabriel's message there. If you want to unpack the meaning of Christmas, you have to start with Mary. Mary is a stand-in for all of us. The Catholic contemplatives that I trained with at the monastery, Father Gregory, and all those guys, they're when they go into the monastery, in the old days, they took the name of the saint of the day, and when Merton came into the monastery, it was St. Louis's day, so he became Brother M. Louis. Yeah, and they just call him Brother Louis, but actually on the cross of the M. Louis Merton. The interesting thing about and the M stands for Mary, so that's every Trappist's first name. They don't call Brother Mary Louis, but the M is there because she is the model of contemplation. And I got a poem for today that sort of get us into the immensity of understanding Christmas. Christmas is a huge mystery. We boiled it down to ho, 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 but I mean, really, it's a huge mystery that we do not see the mystery. Black Friday, all this stuff, Monday, every day is, some of this, you see. So here's the poem. It just came out this week. It's called The Advent of Consent. Advent is about consent. Surprised by an extraterrestrial with an outlandish proposition, who among us could consent to open our heart and say, let it be done unto me according to thy will. I mean, just put yourself in Mary's place. Not yet had any kind of sexual relations, intending to marry Joseph. Maybe, I'm sure, like we all do, we all have in our minds how this day should go, how our life should go. And it all got blown up there. I mean, imagine an extraterrestrial comes in with this unbelievable, outlandish proposition that you are going to birth the divine. Who among us could say yes to that? And that is the question for us. That's a question of this season. And she says, all right, let it be done unto me. She said, how can I do this? I haven't known any men. And he said, Holy Spirit's going to come to you. And she said, all right, let it be done unto me according to thy will, according to the divine will. Who could do that? That is the question here of Advent. Whenever you consent to let it be done unto you, your life. Again, I'm stressing a theme in the last few weeks that your life is not about you. There's something bigger afoot here. It's just not about your happiness. It's just not about, happiness is fine, but it's not about that. It's not about your goals and whatever. That's all fine, but there's something bigger, because when all that falls away, you're left with the mystery of what's the bigger, especially you're about to retire. All those years toiling at the mill. Boy, I did it. 30 years of showing up every day and teaching kids. Then it ends one day. So whenever you consent to let it be done unto thee, whether you know it or not, you are walking in the footsteps of all the great contemplatives. Rumi, Merton, Dalai Lama, who we're lucky to still have living ones with us. Some people in this all of us are called to this. He said, but what they get the idea here that whenever you consent to let it be done unto thee. In other words, let your life be given to you and you live that life, whatever it is, whether you know it or not, you're walking in the footsteps of all the great contemplatives. Mary is the one that the Catholics and some Protestants, at least the Episcopalians, recognize as, gee, a model of contemplation. Well, why is that? Mary's, all this stuff happens. Mary, Angel Gabriel, flight to Egypt, son taken off, for who knows where, lost in the temple. That lost in the temple thing is very much like what happens to all of us. We get lost. The part of this, the sea voyage, part of the whole spiritual journey is losing stuff. And Mary lost her whole idea of what her life was going to be. And she said, okay, let it be done unto me. In other words, I can't do it. And you 12-step guys know that that's the first step. The first step is, hey, I've been out there doing it for 40, 50 years and I can't do it. My life's a mess. I can't do it. There's something else. And then, of course, you go to the second step. You just say, I've got to turn myself over to, in the 12 steps, they call it the higher power. There's something bigger than me that's got to be running this show. Think of the hubris of somebody who's saying God is my co-pilot. Are you kidding me? Yeah, no, we're the co-pilot. We got to roll, but I remember seeing a picture from a second grader airplane, and there's Mary and a baby Jesus and Joseph like on board, and then there's this bearded guy driving the airplane, and they said, well, who is that guy? And he said, oh, he's Pontius the pilot. Yeah. No, so we're on a voyage here. And, we missed, here's a question now. What is the meaning of Christmas is a question, but can we grow into an adult and social meaning of this thing? Rather than, let's face it, we have to face our situation. The greed, hatred, violence, injustice, ecological devastation, and just plain old heavy duty suffering on this planet. They're too great to settle for some kind of infantile gospel and an infantile Jesus. I remember having the little Advent little cardboard things, and every day you would open it up and there'd be some little angel there or something, whatever. And at the end, there was the baby. Well, that's something for like kids. But we do have a kind of infantile version of not only what Christmas is about, but the whole gospel and what Jesus's message was, which was an adult and social message. Okay. Of the meaning of, I'll just, it's hard to even take it. It'll be as crazy as what Gabriel said to Mary, millennia ago. But this is a symbol of the incarnation, the coming into flesh of the sacred, of the divine. This moment. That's the story. And can we really grow into that? Can we grow into that? It's preposterous. It's even, as Jesus found out, people who seriously listened to what he was saying, they thought it was blasphemy to say that the Holy One could be in you. It wasn't just Jesus. Of course, that's a way that we keep it infantile that this happened to Jesus, and and no, his whole message was he's a stand-in for all of us, that we have at the very center, incarnated in the body, in the flesh, in the time, because believe me, the 73-year-old body is time bound. There's an expiration date. We might be more or less aware of this, but there's an expiration date on this guy. But then at the very center of us, we have eternity. We have what Jesus called the kingdom of heaven. These are just all words that have been translated out, finally into English. But he was really talking, his word for that in Aramaic was Malkuta. First of all, it was a feminine gendered word. When he was talking about the kingdom is within us, the kingdom is among us, he used the word Malkuta, and it actually is a feminine gendered word, and not in a patriarchy are you going to have the queendom of heaven. It just didn't happen. That would have been more accurate. But why it's feminine gendered? Because it's a sense of pregnancy. You see, it's a sense of something in you, the God seed, that's you're pregnant with it. You're holding it. Can you bring it to birth? And see, so that's why it's, anybody, my daughter's in Atlanta with her good friend who's bringing her second baby to birth, and she's got, a few couple months to go. Any of you who have actually done that, a little more about it than I do. I'm working from the outside as a man, and then some, but we're all called to do this. We're all called to bring this seed of the divine full term to birth into the world. It's an amazing proposition. Got Jesus crucified, among other things, because that was, that's blasphemy. The Holy One was totally other. And that is true. What Jesus did, the radical thing Jesus did was he said, it's also totally in you. And he was asking people to hold both of those realities, that this thing that's bigger than all of us is plays by a totally different set of rules than we do. This whatever you want to call this, God, the divine. Divine's in another thing that's not bound by time or space, you see. We are bound by time or space, but in us is eternity. In this time-bound body is eternity. Now that's can you consent to that? Can you consent to operate on that principle? Jesus was just telling everybody, that's why you have all the deaf, the blind, these are all images of how hard it is for us to actually accept our own process of divinization. Doesn't mean that you're like some kind of superhero. It means that you have the seed of the love supreme, as Coltrane would call it. That's my favorite word. That's my favorite. It's the love supreme. You might not like, your ears might not be into Coltrane when he was doing the love supreme, but that was his final thing. He was just trying to, and he birthed it on that record. Yeah. And that you have the possibility of bringing to full term and then birthing a love supreme. Yeah. So the questions are, can you grow into this? Can you, Mary is the symbol of contemplation in the Catholics anyway, is Mary pondered all these mysteries in the silence of her heart. So now we're right where we started that one Sunday during COVID, heart to heart. Heart to heart is really human heart, divine heart. One. These two very different things, time-bound kind of all our ego stuff and all that, that's all part of it. And then this other part, higher power, deeper power. You've been trying to go through life on your own, as I did for decades. And well, you know what that feels like. I knew there was something more. What do you really long for? Is it a Weber grill? I mean, really, what do you really long for? Well, you're longing for this. That's why people put their hands here. In a lot of traditions, in both Buddhist and Christian, they put their hands right here. These two palms together. This true time-bound thing, the eternal thing, comes together in the heart. That's what we're doing. So, can you consent to birth your inner divinity? That's the question of that's the angels coming in the window. You have an inner divinity. Can you consent to birth it? Merton would say, can you consent to birth your true self? My favorite line from all the Jesus wisdom comes from the Gospel of Thomas, something that's not taught. Most Christians don't even know about it. I once talked to a priest who was really of the highest praise for a Catholic priest that I could say is, he approximated being a Christian, being a follower of Jesus. And I said, and he was a good guy. Had gone to Haiti with me, and we were very close. And when I discovered the Gospel of Thomas, I said, well, what do you make of the Gospel of Thomas? And I'm thinking he's a Jesus guy here. He must have read all this stuff. Yeah, it was new to me. And he said, never read it, never will. And I said, what? I said, the Gospel of Thomas, you never read it? Never read it, never will. I said, 4 is good enough for me. It was a kind of glazing over. It was a kind of like there was like some walls behind his, Jesus who walked through walls. Christ did. He was being Christ said. Jesus didn't walk through any walls, but Christ walked through the walls. And I said, really? And my favorite, this is the thing that I based my entire life on, are these lines from Jesus. Jesus says to Thomas the only one who heard it, perhaps because Thomas was the one who needed to hear it. See, it landed on Thomas. Thomas was a kind of 6 on the Enneagram. He was a kind of skeptic, which is healthy, don't believe it until, he wanted to see the goods. And he said, Thomas, he said, if you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. Everybody was looking at Jesus as a savior. Jesus was not playing that game. He told Thomas, he said, if you bring forth what is within you. Now he's talking about this God seed, this divinity that all of us have. He says, if you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. But if you don't bring forth what is within you, what you don't bring forth will destroy you. Tough saying, tough wisdom. Maybe that's why it's not taught, because it really says there's chips on the line here. Not that it'll destroy you. It just your life will be unfulfilled. And it goes for all of what we're working with. It works on a lot of levels, that statement. We were talking about grief and despair and fear, that most of it, 90% of it is in our subconscious. We pushed it down there because we couldn't deal with it when we were kids. Well, in the adult world, that's what Greenspan's work was. She says, bring it forth. That'll be your salvation. If it lies down there, it's going to hurt you in a lot of different ways, because it's going to come out sideways, acting out. Now, you see these guys shoot up, nightclubs. They shoot their own teammates in Virginia. I mean, this is crazy. That's what he's talking about. If you don't bring it forth, if you don't deal with it, and ultimately, if you don't birth your own inner divinity, what have you done? I mean, it's a remarkable. And the Buddha, in his own way, was saying the same thing 500 years ago, before Jesus, but with a totally different feel to it. They started at different points, but the point was, whether you're talking about you have the seeds of the Buddha in you. Buddha meant to wake up. Advent. Advent means to wake up. See, same thing. There's something better than what you're living with. You have to give birth to, whether it's a Buddha nature, Christ nature. These are just labels we put on it. There's work to do here, and Advent's time to do it. Now, what does it take to do this work? It takes silence, stillness. It takes having what we call meditation practice or contemplation. And think of the least silent part of the year. See what we've done. Everybody's running around. There's no stillness. And so this is a totally countercultural practice, if you accept it. I sit down on this cushion twice a day, pretty much every day, just as part of my normal practice. I'm adding a third one. I'm going to sit down before I go to bed. And so I'm adding a little more stillness. All of nature is calling us to this. Nature is getting quieter. It's getting stiller. If you're lucky enough to have snow sometimes, it doesn't get any quieter. See, and so it goes. This whole liturgical year was brilliant because it was geared to the stages of this sacred roundabout that we're always going through. This is my 73rd time this is. I'm starting to get it. A lot of you guys are younger. You could get it now. Makes a big difference when you get it, you see. All right, so what we're segueing to now is really the boat that's going to take us across the Sea of Galilee, take us through the tsunami to the other side. Buddha is always talking about going to the other side. Same image, getting out of this. And there is some place to go, you see. And you need a raft. You need a vessel. Jesus didn't have to swim across the Sea of Galilee. He got into a boat. The boat is meditation. Okay, so let's just ready ourselves for that.